Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 679, and today's date is May 28th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Economy Worse Than Thought, U.S. Government Readies for a Major National Crisis. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we've been talking about Greece for a while now. We understand that Greece is having a lot of troubles. There are people making runs on the bank. We understand they had to dip into the emergency SDRs with the IMF to pay for their last payment. We realize that they might put off their next payment and pay all the payments at the end of June. We realize that Greece at this point in time is completely bankrupt. They just have no funds whatsoever. And an ECB report has come out, and they're saying the risk for Greek default has now increased sharply, according to the latest financial stability review of the ECB. We see that the IMF right now is saying that default is around 70% possible. So the probability of Greece defaulting has reached 70%. They're saying, given that the last IMF payment was made by drawing down Greece's SDR reserves, an exhaustion of cash buffers is a fair assumption. The most likely catalyst in coming weeks is therefore likely to be the Greek government's ability or not to pay the IMF. So this tells us they are expecting a default. Everything has been prepared for this default. And we know they have the drachma designed. We've been hearing talks about dual currencies. We know that Greece has been talking to China. We understand that Greece has been talking to Russia. They've signed some deals. And we see from China's ambassador to Greece, he is saying the prospects of cooperation between Greece and China in the tourist sector are absolutely brilliant. He noted that a catalyst for the increase of tourism is the settlement of visa and strengthening of direct air links between the two countries. So it looks like Greece is looking at China and Russia. It seems like they're making deals maybe behind the scenes. We understand the Special Banking Committee has already decided that if Greece does default, they're not going to consider it a default. It's just something that happened, and they don't have to pay out anything from the credit default swaps or the derivatives. We see the ECB, the IMF, they're all indicating that yes, it looks like Greece might be defaulting at this time. And we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully as time goes on, because as we know, other countries are looking at this. They're looking at the situation saying, if they default and they get away with this, Iceland did it. We can do the same thing. And we can see a total destruction of the Eurozone at this point. We see here in the United States, they're continuing with the illusion that everything is absolutely fine. But when we look at everything, and we've been looking at things for quite a while now, all the indicators, all the information that's come out counters what the government is saying. It counters what we see with our own eyes. It counters the recovery illusion. We see that initial jobless claims rose to 282,000 against expectations of 270,000. So it was bumped up. But when we look at the graph of initial jobless claims, we see that it's up and down, but really it has gone nowhere. They do not count those people who've lost their jobs, especially in retail. They count them if they have a job as a full-time job, but when they lose their job, and a lot of states vary depending on the amount of hours you work and how much you make, they don't count them as a job loss, or it doesn't give them the ability to claim unemployment insurance. We understand that they're not counting all those jobs that were lost in the energy sector, hundreds of thousands. They got rid of layoff reporting back in 2013 because of budget cuts, but they kept the golf course. They kept their restaurants. It's funny what they get rid of, what they don't need. We understand that the youth coming out of college today, they are going to have a problem getting a job. And there was a report that recently came out from the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They're saying the class of 2015 is officially the most heavily indebted graduating class in the history of the U.S. higher education. As each student leaves college, they will have an average debt load of $35,000. These proud new graduates will enter a job market where they'll quickly discover there are no jobs. As Steve Wynn said, the idea of a U.S. economic recovery is basically an illusion. It's not there. It's a complete dream. In fact, high unemployment rates among recent graduates was recently cited by Moody's. And they're saying that, listen, we see how much debt there is in the student loan arena, and they made this decision to place some $3 billion in student loan-backed ABS on review. The OECD is out with a new report which looks at the world's youth unemployment problem in an effort to determine why it is that 35 million people between the ages of 16 and 29 are jobless. But they're telling us that everything is fine. Everyone has a job. They're working. And if this was true, and we can use common sense with this, and I've mentioned this before, we would see retail, real estate expanding. Corporations would be hiring. People would be purchasing. People would feel secure in their jobs and they would be taking out loans. The government would not have to go to the students and say, listen, we have different student loan deferment programs which will help you because we know you don't have a job. You might even end up paying zero on your student loan since you don't have a job. They wouldn't introduce the subprime auto loan program. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't need to do it. They wouldn't change the way people get mortgages where they say, oh, you only need 3% down, where there are a lot of banks out there saying 0% down, just trying to bring in the people. And if you have subprime credit, don't worry about it. We will give you a loan. They're trying to sucker everyone into it at this time. And if we realize what we're seeing here is that this is the height of the market. We see the Postal Service. They're looking to cut about $750 million by closing some of their locations. And the government is saying, absolutely not. We cannot let this happen. You cannot close this. Why? Because 7,000 more jobs would be lost, and they cannot have this at this point in time. Because this is a continuing theme that we're seeing. More and more companies are laying off. The United States Postal Service, as we know, they've been in trouble. They don't have enough to continue on. They have to continually cut costs, and this would be a lot of jobs. And where are they going to find a job? Especially in the retail market, that's a dead end. If you're looking at corporations, they're laying off thousands of people. Of course, the government can't tell us this because they canceled that program. So where would these people find jobs? So the government is saying, no, this cannot happen this year. Maybe next year we will look at this. But the everyday American is starting to realize that there is something wrong. Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index, after dropping to its lowest since December, plunged once again this week to 40.9 from 42.4. This is the lowest since November and extends the losing streak to 7 weeks. something we have not seen since May of 2008. Gallup's weekly tracking of consumer confidence also dropped back to its lowest level since December 2014, with 53% of Americans right now saying the economy is getting worse. People are starting to realize that, something's wrong here, because we see the unemployment rate at 5.4%. I have my job right now. I hear rumblings of layoffs, so I'm going to send my resume out there. I send it out there, and no one's getting back to me. How can this be? They're telling us there's plenty of jobs out there. So months go by, you keep sending the resume out there, and nothing comes back. Something is wrong. And we can see at this point in time that consumer confidence is starting to fall. People are getting worried. They don't understand what's going on. They're believing what the government, the corporate media has been telling them, but they feel something's wrong, even though the president has been telling us all along, in a recovery, you won't feel it. You'll just have to believe what I'm saying. You'll just have to believe what I say. So even though you don't feel the recovery, just believe me. Well, I hate to tell him this, but you would feel it. You would know it. You would feel secure in your job. You would feel secure in your home. You would not worry where your next paycheck is going to come from. You would not worry if you're going to get a job after college. All that wouldn't be there, because that would be a true recovery. What we're seeing right now is a bubble recovery. A recovery that was put together by the central bank U.S. government to convince the American people that we are in a recovery. But we know we're not. We know this is all fake, phony, and false. We see the pending home sales in real estate jumped to the highest they've seen since 2006. It's a miracle. Well, you have to remember, these are pending home sales. These are not actual sales. These are people who've taken out contracts. Doesn't mean they're going to follow up and actually go through with it. These are the people that want a home. So they signed up and said, yes, we will try to get this home. But what's very interesting about all of this is that in April, the existing home sales declined. New home sales have been declining. Lumber prices have been falling. The demand for lumber has been falling. Something doesn't fit into this picture. Sales in furniture stores declining. Larry Yun from the National Association of Realtors expects a rebound heading into the summer. He's saying that the housing market can handle the interest rates well above 4%. Well, I hate to tell him this, but every time we see the interest rates tick up for mortgages, we see mortgage applications decline, refinancing decline. If the interest rates go higher, the situation will get worse, not better. And this will not help the real estate market. You have to remember, they've brought the interest rates so low just to get the real estate market moving. And it's not. If we go back to 2006, 2007, when interest rates were at 8%, this market would fall apart, because what happens is it bumps all these people out of the market for the house. So if they were looking at a house at $300,000 and the interest rates ticked up to 5, 6, 7%, they can't buy a house now. How many people would be kicked out of the market? Millions. And they know this. This is why they're keeping the interest rates very low. And we see the surge in Northeast pending home sales is in stark contrast with the collapse in new home sales in the Northeast, which plunged 19% from a year ago, which begs the question, just why are home builders so leery of building new homes in the Northeast where, at least according to the National Association of Realtors, housing demands is off the charts? A few more months of this discrepancy, we're going to find out that someone's lying here. It reminds me of the unemployment figures, the GDP figures, the Baltic Dry Index. All of this is starting to separate now from the government illusionary, massaged statistical numbers, I should say manipulated also, compared to what's really going on in the market. When I look around at the market, I get a completely different picture. I see people in certain areas struggling to sell their homes. They're continually coming down in price. I see many homes who've been on the market for 90, 120, 180 days. And if you're in that market where you're still booming, guess what? It is a domino effect, and it will affect you sooner or later. We saw this back in 2008. And right now, they are pushing as many people into the market as they possibly can. And most of this is driven by free money from investment companies, hedge funds, foreign investors. And they're paying cash. They're not paying with mortgages. We see the Mortgage Bankers Association. They're out there saying that, mortgage application and refinancing applications have fallen again by 1.6%. This is the week ending May 22nd. They're saying just refinancing applications fell by 3.9%. This shows us that the everyday person is not going out and purchasing these homes. Actually, if you look at this, mortgage applications post the 5th consecutive decline. That's how many weeks applications for mortgages have been on the decline. As soon as the interest rates ticks up, it kicks these people out of the market and they cannot purchase. So are we going to see an interest rate hike? This would be a complete disaster. We see manufacturing, once again, continually declining. Why is this? Well, there's no demand. The people are tapped out. People are not purchasing goods. People are not going to companies, or companies are not going to companies and purchasing certain items. The factories don't have to produce. If they don't have to produce, they don't need the raw material. And this is why we see the Baltic Dry Index at 588 points. It has moved absolutely nowhere. It's staying down, and it's just bouncing down in the high 500s. That's it. If we go back in history, we see the Baltic Dry Index is normally 1,200, 1,400, 1,000 points. We are well below this. And again, the factories don't need the raw material if there's no demand. We see U.S. containerized exports plunge off the chart. The index is a measure of export activity of manufactured products sent by container ships. But in the overall U.S. trade statistics, the rise of commodity export papers over the collapse in exports of manufactured goods. The index at 0.665 in April is 28.4% below a year ago and 33.5% below the level of January 2010. It's less than half of what it was in 2010, 2011, and 2012. How can this be? We're in this incredible recovery. Export activity just about plunged off the chart during the first quarter. Exports are vital to every economy. Currency wars are fought to increase exports. Trade wars are fought over it. Every country wants to export more and import less. Exports add to GDP, imports subtract from it. U.S. exports manufactured goods, which should have gotten more competitive in the international markets, completely crashed. As corporations shift manufacturing to locations in other countries, the U.S. will import more, but has fewer manufactured goods to export. We are in a death spiral. This economy is completely falling apart and collapsing at this time. It's much worse than we thought. And we thought we were collapsing. But when we're starting to get all this information in, we're starting to realize that this economy, that the government, the central bankers are trying to convince us of, that we're in a recovery, that everything is fine, always think the opposite. Because whenever a central banker, a government official comes out and tells you something, they're basically tricking you. It's the opposite of what's happening. Just go back to 2008 when they told us, don't worry everyone, the housing market is fine. The subprime has been contained. We're not forecasting any type of recession in 2008, and they made this statement in 2008. The IMF tells us that Greece is fine after the third tranche of debt. Don't worry, we're not going to take your money out of the banks, they told the people of Cyprus. Then they said it was going to be 8%. Then it turned out to be 47%. It is always the opposite of what they're telling you. They want you looking in the other direction while they get prepared for the collapse. This is what they do. They're ready, they're profiting, they're prepared. You're looking at the stock market, you're looking at the statistical illusionary numbers. The central bankers, the U.S. government, are laughing. We tricked the people once again. They think we're recovering. They're out there adding on more debt. They're out there thinking that there's plenty of jobs. They're out there thinking that real estate is fantastic, that prices are going to continually go up. It's all fake. And when this whole entire thing's come crashing down, people are going to go, what just happened? I don't understand. They told us that everything was fine. This is what they said prior to 2008. They told us that things were okay. Everything was contained. The economy is strong. We're not forecasting any type of recession any time in the future. And we can see at this point, it is one big lie. Now, as we know, there are many countries now looking to repatriate their gold. They're getting nervous. They see what's really happening around the world. They understand the dollar is dying. It's collapsing. They understand the world is in a massive amount of debt that can never be repaid. And a lot of the countries are saying, you know something, we need our gold back. A lot of them have ordered their gold from the Fed, which doesn't have the gold to give them. Germany found that out. We see Austria right now is saying that they want their gold back from the Bank of England, which holds about 80% of Austria's gold. And they will soon only hold about 30% because they want 92.4 tons back home to Vienna, with another 47.6 tons being sent to Switzerland. Austria is explicitly demonstrating a lack of confidence in the pro-Western system, of which the Bank of England is a critical cog, and instead opting for neutral Switzerland, which will hold nearly 50 tons of the gold formerly located at the Bank of England. And we see a lot of these countries have been making bilateral trade agreements, becoming yuan renminbi hubs, because they realize they need to hold this currency in their reserve, because when the dollar starts to fall apart and crumble, they need to protect themselves. So they need gold, they need other currencies, they have to diversify and get rid of the dollar. And we're starting to see this happen in every single one of the countries. We understand the United States is still pushing the TPP. They want this, and we see Julian Assange is out there, and he's saying that the TPP has nothing to do with trade. It's about corporate control. Only 5 of the 29 chapters are about traditional trade, and that's absolutely correct. It's all about turning everything over to the corporations, the central bankers. Isn't that what you do in a fascistic system? This is what you do. The government and the corporations meld into one, where you can't tell the difference. We see the Patriot Act right now is going to expire May 31st at 12 o'clock. And we understand, even if it does expire, you know the government is not going to stop spying on the people. And yesterday I talked about this, how if you aren't doing anything wrong, people say, oh, I don't care if the government spies on me. And I said, well, if you're not concerned about this, then your private information should be sent out to everyone, right? Because you trust everyone and you trust the government. If you believe that you're not doing anything wrong, you should tell me your bank account, tell me where you hide your valuables in your house. Actually, leave your house open and let the government come in whenever they want to take a look around. And I mentioned this before, and a lot of people aren't really getting it. When you decide to give your private information to a company or a person, that is your choice. Your freedom to say, you know something, here is my private information. When the government does it without asking your permission, you have lost your freedom of choice. You have lost the ability to say no. You basically are bowing down to the government and saying nothing. And our founding fathers went through this. They knew what it was like for the British to come in and just take over their home, to go through their private information, to collect their private documents. This is why they went ahead and created these rights. It wasn't something out of the blue and saying, you know what we should do? Let's just create these. No, they went through it. Now, we have gone such a long time where people don't realize what it is like. This is why they're like, whatever, it doesn't make a difference. Until that time when government officials, government employees, government Gestapo come through your home and say, we're taking this, we're staying here, or if you're on the road, we can search you whenever you want. Until you go through it, until you feel it, a lot of people don't understand why these rights are here. Actually, a lot of people don't even know their rights. But when you allow a government to do whatever they want, you lose your freedom of choice. And that's the basic framework of your rights. The choice to say no. You cannot do this unless you have probable cause and a warrant. You have to prove it to a judge to look at my private information. You cannot shut me up if I want to talk about the government, if I don't agree with the government. And if you're telling me that I'm anti-government, or if I'm anti-whatever, that's not free speech. That's a dictatorship. That's a government regime telling you what to think. The whole part of the Bill of Rights is to give you freedom of choice, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, the freedom to be private. That's what it's all about. The government at every moment needs to prove to you why they need to do this before they even do anything. And if they can't prove it, they can't go ahead. This is why all of this is here. To stop a government from coming down on the people and doing whatever they want. And we need to take a lesson at what's going on in Ukraine and any other of the countries that the government of the United States decided to go in, have a coup d'etat, change out the elected government and put a puppet regime in there. Look how the people are treated in that government. Look at the dictatorship. Look how they remove the rights of the people and call them terrorists when they don't agree. It's happening here in the United States. They're calling people domestic terrorists if they do not agree with the government, or a sovereign citizen. They come up with all these different terms to try to convince people, there's certain groups we need to watch out for. And this is what the government likes to do. It likes to pit the American person against each other. This way it confuses the situation and keeps them off of them. Well, we need to band together. We need to come together. Doesn't matter if you're black, you're white, brown, yellow, orange, blue, purple, whatever religion you are, it makes no difference. We're all here together. We are a people. We are a strong people. When we're together, we are a force. And the government knows this, and this is why they continually push the notion of trying to divide us. At every turn, this is what they do. And we see they're continually pushing the fear of the Patriot Act. New Attorney General Loretta Lynch has been engaged in rank fear-mongering to coerce renewal of the Patriot Act, saying that those people, those opponents, will bear the blame for the next attack. This is what rogue governments do. Those governments that are not for the people, they scare you into doing things you don't want to do, that your instincts tell you, no, this is not right. This is illegal. The Patriot Act is illegal. The author of the Patriot Act says that the NSA has gone far beyond what the act intended. Of course they have. They violated the Fourth Amendment. They have violated the people's rights. Every single person should be up in arms telling the government, you violated the rights, you violated the Constitution, you need to step down. This is what needs to happen right now. Because even though they tell you they're going to stop bulk data collection, which we know they're not going to, they're not going to do it. Ever. They're afraid of the people, and they need to continually spy on each and every one of us. That's how scared they are. Now, we understand in Macedonia, the United States government central bankers have been pushing forth a color revolution. We see that Putin is out there saying we're closely watching the current developments in the country of Macedonia. He understands the difficulties, and we all realize why this is all happening, because there is a pipeline that is going to go through Macedonia, the Turkish Stream, and the U.S. government central bankers have their own pipeline that's going to filter into Europe, and they do not want Macedonia using or building the Turkish Stream. We see this happening in Serbia, where the Serbia government will join the U.S.-backed Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, following Washington's calls to reduce dependency on Russian gas. They're also looking at Russia to have the Turkish Stream. And we can see that this is becoming a battle in this area. And it is continuing, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe something happens in Greece if they end up defaulting going with BRICS and Russia. And we'll have to watch this very carefully as time goes on. Poroshenko actually signed the moratorium on foreign debt, and we understand that Russia holds about $3 billion worth of the debt. And Yatsenyuk said the suspension of payments could only relate to private loans. But the interesting thing is, they consider the $3 billion debt to Russia as private. So you know this is being done on purpose, and we understand the U.S. government has given the Ukrainian government $2 billion worth of loan guarantees. By the end of the year, it will be $3 billion. We see the United States will not lift sanctions in Crimea, even if the Minsk agreements are implemented. U.S. State Department spokesman Jeff Rothke said that the United States considers Crimea part of Ukraine and supporting Ukraine's territorial integrity. So they still are out there pushing the notion that Crimea is still part of Ukraine. Ukraine's interior minister is calling for a full blockade of the Donbass region, and Poroshenko is out there saying that martial law can be implemented within hours. Now, if he's following the Minsk II ceasefire agreement, why would he be talking about martial law? And he's saying that he can declare martial law in the whole country or in different areas of the country. And we can see right now something is getting ready to happen in Ukraine. I mean, the United States government, central bankers, the corporate media, they're pushing this new propaganda story that they claim that the way Russia is hiding the Russian troops is that they have mobile crematoriums. And every time a Russian soldier dies, they have a cremation. So nobody can see these soldiers, which is absolutely ridiculous. And of course, Marie Harf is out there saying that the U.S. State Department cannot confirm media reports alleging that Russia has delivered mobile crematoriums to Ukraine. Well, if they are doing this and they're covering their tracks with the Russian soldiers, where's all their equipment? Do they take the tanks, the missile launchers, the trucks, all to the junkyard and melt them down before anyone notices them? Because they've been telling us there's thousands upon thousands of this equipment inside of Ukraine. And again, there's no satellite imagery. There's no photos, videos, just propaganda. And we're seeing at this point in time, the Ukraine's defense minister on Thursday, they are saying that Russia have moved forces to the border of Ukraine, which they have not, because if they have, there'd be full-colored HD satellite imagery showing us all the equipment there. And they're saying that there's a risk of fighting resuming between the army of pro-Russian separatists, which they call them, which is really not what they are. They are the southeastern people of Ukraine. And they're saying that this could be happening in the next couple of months. And like I said in my past reports, I believe the propaganda is coming out now. We see NATO pushing the propaganda. We see the U.S. pushing the propaganda. They're pushing the propaganda that Russia is now bringing in military assets, putting them on the border of Ukraine. But we have to remember, there's an open sky treaty they've flown over many, many times, and they've never seen any of this. And I've said this in other reports that I do believe come this summer, I think a lot of things are going to start to happen. I think the Middle East, Ukraine, they're going to go, full power on everything that's been building up all this time. We see the Latvia's cabinet of ministers has approved a request to ensure a permanent NATO military presence in the country. And actually, this kind of breaks the agreement that NATO and Russia has, because the deployment of permanent forces flies in the face of the founding act on mutual relations, cooperation and security between NATO and the Russian Federation, which was signed in Paris on May 27, 1997. It declared that NATO and Russia do not consider each other as adversaries, and that the two parties will work together to prevent any potentially threatening buildup of conventional forces in agreed regions of Europe and in Central and Eastern Europe. And it looks like right now they don't care about that anymore, because the United States government central bankers are ready to push a war. And we see this is being pushed harder and harder. We see Ashton Carter, Defense Secretary, is in the Philippines saying that U.S. affirms ironclad promise to defend the Philippines against China when they attack. Actually, when the U.S. decides to start the war, they will be there to protect the Philippines from China. This is why they are setting up bases all around China, encircling China, and containing them. Most of the fleet has been deployed to the Asian Pacific region in the past 2 years, and they have strengthened the military bases, the military assets, all in this area, and it's ongoing. We see the U.S. has been training the Free Syrian Army in Turkey. We know they've been training this Free Syrian Army in Jordan. And as we know, every time they release the Free Syrian Army, they defect right to the Islamic State. And I thought this was very interesting, where Obama says the program aims to target only the Islamic State, not troops loyal to Syrian President Assad. But what he leaves out is, we are training these soldiers, and we're going to release 5,000 per year or whatever, and they will not attack Assad. Well, what happens when the majority of them defect to the Islamic State, which has been happening? Guess what? All bets are off, because they can say the Islamic State is attacking Assad. It's a perfect plan they came up with. The Islamic State is our enemy. And they're attacking Assad. Actually, the Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States government. This is why they're training them, giving them the weapons, because they go right into Syria and they go right into the Islamic State, and they need to bolster the rank of the Islamic State. They need to build up the troops to march into Damascus. This is what they've been doing and planning for. Yesterday we talked about the IRS, and it turns out that CNN is blaming it on Russia. Just hours after it happens. They track them down. They know exactly where it's coming from. And the Defense Secretary Ashton Carter will ensure that the Pentagon crack team will determine the appropriate response to this latest example of Russian aggression. All of this is building up now. It's being pushed. We see the military accidentally sends live anthrax to 9 states via FedEx. Some of it ended up in South Korea. Now the question is, why are they sending this around? Was this part of a plan after the event? Because I noticed every time there's a major event, like in the Boston bombing, we see anthrax or some type of poison on a letter. During 9/11, we saw the same thing. Were they preparing and getting ready for the event? Is this why this has been shipped around to Maryland, Texas, Wisconsin, Delaware, New Jersey, Tennessee, New York, California, and Virginia? It seems very suspicious that they're playing with this right now. We understand that the president has presidential directives that was started way back, and if you put them all together, you see the president has a huge amount of power in an emergency crisis. One of these is a presidential directive that was issued during the second term of George W. Bush. It is entitled National Security Presidential Directive, NSPD 51, Homeland Security Presidential Directive, HSPD 20. The document is primarily concerned with continuity of our federal government in the event of a catastrophic emergency. So what is the catastrophic emergency? The catastrophic emergency means any incident, regardless of location, that results in extraordinary levels of mass casualties, damage, or disruption severely affecting the U.S. population, infrastructure, environment, economy, or government functions. You mean a false flag event. That's what they're saying. If we do have such a catastrophic emergency, the president essentially becomes a dictator. He can implement martial law. Congress loses pretty much all power. You lose your rights. They're suspended. And we can see right now that the shadow government then takes over. It has all fallen apart. The shadow government comes out from the shadows, and they control everything. This is what they are planning to do. And what's very interesting about all this is a couple weeks ago, and I mentioned this before in other reports, that the Treasury announced they were going to hold cash on hand for a disaster, a natural disaster, or any other type of major crisis or disaster or catastrophe. And they're going to do this for 1 year. And we can see from what's happening now, everything is really starting to build up. We see more propaganda about Russia cyber attacking the United States. Of course, this is not just one agenda. There's many agendas associated with that. We see they blamed cyber attacks on North Korea, Syria, China. We understand NORAD is refurbishing Cheyenne Mountain. We see Ukraine is getting ready for a major offensive coming very soon. We see the Middle East building up to go after Assad. We see color revolutions in Macedonia. We see the buildup in the Pacific. We see military assets being moved all around the United States. We understand that Jade Helm is going to occur this summer. A lot of places, they're saying it already started, where they're going to practice what it would be like to have martial law, what it would be like to control the people, to lock down the environment and have curfews. It seems like we're on the path right now because they know the economy is much worse than they thought. It's completely crumbling apart, and they're having a tougher time stopping it. And this is why this is all building up right now. And we all need to be prepared. We all need to be ready. And this is why, if you haven't done it, you need food, you need medical supplies, you need whatever you can get your hands on at this point in time. You've had this time to prepare. We don't know when it's coming exactly. A lot of people say this fall. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen this fall. We don't even make it past next year. Because to me, with all the indicators of what's going on in the economy, there is absolutely no way they can keep this controlled, because things are really starting to fall apart. The first part of 2008, after the Great Recession, they had the buildup of the bubble. Now it's to the top. Things are not going the way they want. The bubble is having a tougher and tougher time being inflated, and it is almost ready to pop, because the American people know there's something wrong. The people around the world know there's something wrong. Everything is collapsing all at once. The debt cannot be sustained. And this is why they're pushing and accelerating everything at this point. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.